Hi, this is chapter 2, which is the ecology of socialization. We'll talk a little bit more in this chapter about socialization. So, what are the aims? To implement developmental skills. So, I highlighted that one. We'll concentrate on another slide. Develop self concept, self esteem, self regulation, identity, empower people to achieve and reach goals. So, what are developmental tasks? Well, we've talked about the domains of development, but there's also developmental tasks that are somewhat similar to age appropriate tasks or developmentally appropriate, where it lies between the individual need and the societal demand, right? So, if you think about things like sleeping arrangements, if it were up to a child, they'd probably sleep with their parent as long as they could. But culturally or societally, sometimes we push children to their own beds and by a certain age. Also, fostering independence is one of those. How much do we foster depending on what culture the child's growing up in? Now, self concept and self esteem are a little bit different. Self concept is your perception of your identity, how you view yourself. So, there's two video clips that are together on the same page on Blackboard, one about self concept and one about self esteem. Self worth falls under self esteem. How much do we value ourselves? And again, these are influenced by many different things in our lives. Now, how do we build positive self esteem? Well, we need a positive environment through praise and positive encouragement, demonstrating love, listening, playing, talking, and not being negative, right? Not ridiculing, not shaming, and being aware of what the child is observing as we are acting. So, what is the benefit of having a high self esteem? Well, children can handle strong emotions, and we'll look at self regulation here in just a minute. They also tend to have more positive and healthy relationships, and they can take responsibility for actions in their life. So self-regulation is the ability to control your impulses, your behavior, and or your emotions until it's appropriate to express those. And again, depending on the time, the place, or what it is that you are upset about. So, children from an early age learn through modeling how to self regulate. So, we have to really be careful again how we're socializing children to self regulate themselves. So, again, self regulation is the ability to calm yourself when you're upset and cheer yourself when you're down. So think about if you had some news, like you found out it's going to cost $5,000 to fix your car, right? How would you react to this news? And there's positive and negative reactions, and both of these would contribute to a child's development of their own self regulation, right? So here is an example. So let's say we find out, and again in this climate could be true, my job is ending at the end of the month. So a way that we could positively react to that, and again thinking about how we're modeling that for others, is you know what? I wanted to find a new job. I'm going to grow in my field. I wanted other opportunities, and now I'm going to go seek that. A negative reaction would be panicking or blaming the job or complaining, and again, not really taking responsibility that things happen. Sometimes we have to move on. So think about what children learn from both of those reactions. And they start applying that to their own reactions. There's very much, again, when we're thinking about socialization. Okay, now let's look at our identity. And according to Eric Erickson, our life is full of stages that, depending on the outcome, it influences who we become, the development of our identity. So here's Erickson. He lived for most of the 1900s. He's a pretty influential stage theorist. He studied under Freud. He had a background of observation and having experience with different cultures. And again, he was really interested in how different cultures and different experiences led to the development of identity. His stages went across the lifespan from birth to old age, and he focused on conflicts that we would go through. Again, the outcome of these stages would influence who we are becoming. So there's a video on Blackboard I would like you to view regarding his theory. Now, here's a summary of all of his stages, all of the ages, and what the main focus is. Again, if we're focusing on the positive, where if you look at the stage names, every stage is written out for a positive versus a negative. So we want them to develop trust. We want them to develop autonomy, which is independence, to develop the initiative, to develop confidence in their skills. So Erickson again focused on the influence of culture and child rearing and the environment we grow up in really influences whether or not we come through the positive outcome or develop the negative outcome. So his adolescent stage is about identity. He felt that was a really key stage because that was leading you into adulthood and you were still kind of dealing with previous stages. So if you come through that stage with a strong sense of identity, you have a strong self-concept, you've explored options out there, different types of people and friends and activities and jobs, and you've made commitments after you've explored. And you can define who you are, where you're going, goals in life. If you're diffused, then you have unresolved conflicts from early childhood. You then have unresolved issues that lead into your adulthood, and it leaves you unprepared. Now, each of these agents of socialization, we've talked about that before, family, school, peers, mass media, they will each be covered under their own chapters, but they kind of give us a broad overview here. And what I want to focus on is family. So we're going to look at some family in terms of culture. So, orientation, how we approach the family as a structure, how we deal with happiness, sadness, our emotions, our attitude towards authority, and our overall communication style. So, if we think about orientation, are we a more collectivist type of family where everybody contributes and helps the younger children, the older children, the parents? Or is it more individualistic where each child kind of is fostered to be their own unique self with their own goals and direction in life? Is the coping style of the family active where they sit and talk about issues and talk about problems and setting goals? Or is it more passive where everybody kind of keeps their emotions hidden? What is the attitude toward authority? Is it submissive? Are you expected to just submit to your parent and you don't get any say? Or is it egalitarian where you can have communication about why the rules are the way they are? And is your communication style open and expressive, where you're able to express your emotions? Or is it more restrained and private? And you might find those might be similar to your coping style. Now, in terms of school and peers, again, this will be in its own chapter, but a lot of it depends on what school you go to that aids in your socialization. What kind of care did you receive? And then children are egocentric, so their interactions with peers can be sometimes hard, especially at a young age, where they only can look from their own viewpoint and don't really understand that others have different viewpoints. Again, what about media and community? We'll look at this in, I think, chapter 10. Uh, how has the internet molded us? Social networking, the ability to have technology mobilized, right at our fingertips. And what about the methods? We have aims of socialization, we have agents, and we also have methods. There's affective, there's operant. We're going to concentrate on a few of these, starting with the affective method. So the affective method is through person-to-person interactions. It's using feelings and emotions to connect, and responding, sharing feelings, and expressing oneself. So what theory falls under there? Attachment theory. So when you're in Blackboard, you'll see a video for Erikson and for attachment, and you'll be able to get a general overview of these theories. So and again, an attachment is a strong bond to someone that binds you together through space and over time. And again, that is a really strong and positive way of building relationships with young children. So, a little background on attachment. We develop our attachment skills, or the way we'll develop relationships with others within the first 2 years of life. So, first, we're not really discriminate, then we start to show preference, then we're clearly attached, and then we know how to form relationships. So, that is Bowlby's contribution to attachment. Now, operant methods is a way to produce an effect, right? So with attachment, we're forming a bond, but with operant methods or strategies is a way to produce some kind of effect that we're looking for, whether it be through reinforcement or punishment. But let's get deeper into those. So reinforcement is an object or event presented following a behavior that serves to increase the likelihood that the behavior will occur. So reinforcement or positive reinforcement is adding something like praise or candy or giving attention in order to increase that child to continue that behavior. Now, if you look at my picture for negative reinforcement, that's actually a child getting positive reinforcement, right? They're getting attention. But if we take away that attention, the likelihood is hoping to increase the response of not doing that behavior, which I think in this day and age has become difficult with how many parents, videotape their children and some of the things that we would not like them to continue. Now, extinction is the disappearance of a learned behavior like a tantrum following the removal of the reinforcement like attention. So maybe you've started to realize that every time your child yells at you, you run to them to see what's going on. What if you stop doing that? What if you stop giving them the attention? Well, according to extinction, over time, the tantrum will also go away. And then punishment and feedback. So, a punishment is a physical or psychological painful stimuli or withdrawal of pleasant stimuli when undesirable behaviors are occurring. The child acts out, the child hits another child. Maybe we remove them from the situation, we sit with them, and then use feedback to evaluate what happened, both positive and negative, talking about the behavior and how we want the child to change. Okay, now what about observational methods such as modeling for children? Um, this is imitative learning, right? So the child will typically watch what parents are doing and model that. So you can see that kind of from my two bottom pictures. Then I have this cute video. I know you probably won't hear any volume, but that's okay. That's not the purpose of it. But look here, this baby kitten doesn't know what to do. It's gonna, and then watches mom, right? And starts to learn the technique of bathing. So just a cute little add in there. Now, cognitive methods are things like instruction, like go get your shoes, go do your homework, go clean up your room, and setting standards like I expect A's and B's, I expect your room to be clean, I expect your chores to be done before you go out. And many times we give reasoning, right? Because that allows the child to understand why. We blank so that blank. We do our homework so that we can go out later and have our responsibilities taken care of, right? So we give explanations or causes for an act. Now, what about sociocultural methods, right? Things like symbols can influence us or socialize us, like the peace sign or, graduation, rituals, routines, baking with grandma, traditions, pressure, things like drugs and alcohol. Those all socialize us also as we grow up. Now, what are the outcomes of all of this socialization? Well, again, we learn values, such as maybe the value of work and how we can earn money. We develop our attitudes, whether they're positive or negatives. We develop attributions like I failed because I didn't study, rather than I failed because I'm stupid. Self-esteem, it might be high or low. We might be able to regulate our behavior or may have difficulty. Morals, gender roles, right? All of these outcomes come from being socialized and through the aims of the socialization and through the different methods. Okay, so one thing to think about again is kind of those adult roles, childhood roles, gender roles, along with those things we were looking at, like your family orientation, the coping style. So here's an example. I'm white Euro American. My grandparents came from Europe. And I have specific gender roles and cultural patterns that I grew up with and that I experienced, especially with young females and males. In my family, for the females, it was chores and responsibility and being independent, but also, helping the family and being educated. Now, the young male had similar education, but it was also more about being friends and having sports, right? So here's just an example. On Blackboard, I want you to reflect on where you came from, what your adult models were, how you viewed the roles of yourself as a child, and then again, how your family kind of dealt with daily interactions. All right, email me with any questions.